Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 655. Releasing November 20 for a limited release in Australian cinemas is Diabolic, a horror drama that tells the story of a former member of the Fundamentalist Latter Day Saints cult who seeks answers for her mysterious blackouts only to find a menacing evil. Starring Elizabeth Cullen, John Kim, and Mia Callis, Diabolic is a slow burn creep fest that delves into the evils of men and the horrors of the demonic, and does so through high stakes storytelling and terrific performances. And joining me now to talk about Diabolic is the film's director, Daniel J. Phillips. Daniel, thank you so very much for joining me today.
Great to be here.
My favorite horror movies, is talking about things like Exorcist or what have you, are the movies that are really great at establishing stakes beforehand. They usually do that through drama. You have to establish a character, establish stakes, and get that drama going. And it's something that you've done really well here with Diabolic. So when hell does break loose, so to speak, you understand what's on the line here. It's something I really dug about your movie Diabolic. Is that something that you yourself, as a horror fan, filmmaker, storyteller, really wanted to try to establish with your own film here? You wanted to get those stakes there, want to get those character dynamics going first before any type of spookiness or creepiness kind of comes to the fore. So when that stuff does happen, it's that much more enriching for both the audience and for yourself as a filmmaker.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think that the challenge with sort of the first act of any film is that you need to sacrifice character development for kind of pace, or character development for scares, or character development for horror. And I think it's very, very tempting, and certainly there's lots of pressure always when you're in those moments to sort of want to skip through some of those, more important character moments, not spend time establishing those things so you can either get to the horror quicker or get to the fun stuff quicker or whatever it is. But I think that, films that do that really do it to their own detriment, because if you can set up the characters properly and really take time to get to know them and build that kind of relatability with the audience, I think the scares just hit better. I think when people really care about the characters, I think sometimes the set pieces on their own in these types of movies, people underestimate how much work's been done to set those up character-wise
Mm.
before to make them work properly. So it was really important to me to really take the time to, certainly with Elise in particular, also the lead character, getting time to know her so that we really cared when these things started to happen.
Um, I read that you said that you wanted to do something in regards to a witch or like some type of demonic kind of supernatural kind of aspect to the film. A witch was something that came up quite a bit in the research that I had. What was about that type of supernatural character of a witch that really kind of spoke to you as something really cool to base a story about? What's about that aspect of horror that could really kind of you thought you could really kind of dive into and do something really cool with here with your story?
Yeah, I think that the reason why I wanted to do sort of a witch movie, I guess, is I just find that there's so many different ways to explore how a witch can operate in kind of any time period, in any context, whether there's religion involved or not involved. And I think kind of the best supernatural horror films, certainly a lot of my favorites include a witch, like Eggers' film, obviously, as well as The Conjuring, the first Conjuring, I think,
Mm.
which just approach those things. I mean, those two movies are so far apart. It's too far, as far apart as two movies can be, but yet that kind of central kind of that menace or that presence is that witch. And I just wanted to explore that in general. And then obviously when the FLDS stuff locked into it, it became a very important metaphor for talking about how women have been treated by the church, and kind of the witch in this film is very representative of all those women that have been wronged. Yeah.
When it comes to your witch, LaRue, in the film, I know you just talked about how she's kind of like almost like a symbol for like all the wrongs like put into one kind of entity. But did you look at any type of mythology, any type of I don't know, supernatural occurrences or anything like that, and kind of to base what your witch on? Is LaRue, for example, a name based on anything that's been out there before in regards to witch horror history, or for example?
Yeah, we myself and Mike Harding, one of the co-writers, spent a lot of time looking at how we could ground this in some form of reality and base it on things that were in the law. And there is one Mormon story about a witch called Winnebago, which is a Native American connection there with that kind of thing, where Mormons in that time, certainly in the 1700s, and when the FLDS was in, before it was the FLDS, when it was just Mormonism, Winnebago was a local folklore about this Native American witch that was involved in the killings of young women, and there was some interesting stuff there that we looked at and kind of pivoted it and changed it to sort of suit our story. And LaRue is an old Mormon name that's used quite a bit. It's not
Mm.
necessarily something that a name that someone would be named today, but certainly in the time period, LaRue was as popular as a name like Sarah or something like that. So we wanted to make it feel like she was from another time and place.
Hi guys, Matt here from Matt's Movie Reviews, letting you know that the Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel has launched channel membership. This provides exclusive videos and other cool stuff as well for all channel members. It's under one tier, one price, and with that one price you get exclusive reviews. For example, I'll be going through the American Film Institute's top 100 movies. So every week I'll do a new review based on that movie list. You can get exclusive reviews based on your requests. Request a movie review and I will review it for you. You'll also get exclusive content for behind the scenes stuff as well. You also get exclusive interviews that I haven't posted yet as part of my podcast, like older interviews with Academy Award winners and other great filmmakers and actors as well, and a bunch of other cool stuff as well. I hope you can all join up, be part of this great experience I have an offer for you. Support indie content creators, support a movie critic like myself who is trying to make it through the content creator space. Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel memberships. Please join and get some great exclusive content. The whole FLDS aspect of it is really interesting because as someone who's watched a lot of kind of like films that kind of dive into the same thing, whether it be folk horror, demonic possession, what have you, usually the usual suspects might be Catholic Church, for example, might be maybe even some sects of evangelical kind of stuff like that as well. Whereas the FLDS, it's something that's not really touched on that much in movies. I think maybe I've seen maybe a couple of TV series where they kind of talk about it a bit because it's such an offshoot of the Mormon Church. And here in Australia, like I don't think there's been any example of like the FLDS at all. We do have Mormonism here, as in the mainstream Mormon Church, but not the fundamentalist kind of sect of it all. How did you kind of come around finding that? And before you did find out about the FLDS, were you kind of dipping your toe a bit into like the more kind of traditional aspects of storytelling in regards to the religious aspect of like the Catholic side of things or maybe the evangelical side of things before the FLDS kind of came into your radar?
Yeah, well, my first film Awoken dealt with a Catholic kind of approach to possession horror and exorcism and things like that, which we're obviously all very well familiar with. I think that any kind of religious horror film certainly has its underpinnings in that kind of Catholicism, because I think it's sort of very easy to sort of grab those touch points and go, oh, that feels familiar, this feels like this feels like this. With Mormonism, I didn't know too much about it before, I'd kind of met Mike Harding. And he introduced this idea of the FLDS, and when he explained the concept in particular of baptism for the dead,
Hmm.
I thought it was something he made up because it is so unbelievably bonkers that there is no way that could be real, but it is, and they really, really do that. So I think when I sort of heard about that, I was like, oh, well, that's amazing. I wonder what else they do. And as I did my own research and looked at a bunch of stuff, it was pretty amazing that no one's really done anything in this space yet in horror, because it's very, very ripe for that kind of, that mining it creatively. It seemed to me that the particular cult itself has been certainly appeared in the last kind of maybe 5 to 6 years in a few different things, whether it's documentary or there's a show called Under the Banner of Heaven,
Yeah.
which is a horrific book. If anyone ever reads it, it is the bleakest thing I think I've ever read in my life. Don't read it before bedtime.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that it certainly hadn't been explored in a horror film. So I think that was kind of the way in. I think it's a very unique sect of religion because it's very much like they've frozen themselves in time. They've chosen this sort of period where it was probably very conventional and reasonable to do the things that they're doing, but in a modern context, it's completely insane, and unbelievably misogynistic and abusive. And I think that trying to get a sort of an eye into that world, to trying to understand it a bit and why it operates, and certainly, yeah, just trying to understand how we can use that as a metaphor for some of the sort of more horrific things that happen in the film.
And it's really interesting in that even though the in the film there's like flashback scenes where you see kind of Lisa's kind of like past and such, those moments are set only 10 years prior to the film setting. But because of that really kind of um, inclusive kind of nature of the FLDS, and they're kind of, like you said, live in their own island or their own world, it kind of feels like we could have easily gone back 100 years, just looking at the dress and everything else and the hairstyles and all that kind of stuff. I found it really interesting. They almost felt like a period piece in a kind of way. Even though it's only like 10 years in the past, I thought it was kind of a cool kind of thing that you guys kind of played with there.
Yeah, it like that's absolutely right. Like it's, I think we were pretty careful to make sure that we knew it was grounded in now. With the first scene, kind of, we have a title that very clearly establishes it as 2015, which was something that was not in the script.
Mm.
Because when after I shot it and we were in the edit, we were looking at it and we were like, oh, people are going to think this is in like 1600, because of just the nature of the costumes, the type of language they're using. The setting that we're in is very dark and dingy and looks like something very ritualistic from those kind of touch points we have in the horror genre, which is mostly around the Catholicism stuff. So it was important to say, no, no, this is sort of now, 2015, to then give the sort of leaping off point for the story to take place in the present as well in 2025. So yeah.
I want to talk about Elizabeth Cullen, who plays Elise in this movie. She's absolutely fantastic, and I really like those horror performances. I think horror more than any other genre when it comes to female characters and female actors. I think that's really an opportunity for a lot of kind of like just going full tilt, kind of like in the ringer, getting really physical in a lot of ways. You got like there's a lot of kind of like um transformation happening because of all the different elements that's happening in this film. The first thing that struck me about Elise, though, Elizabeth's character, is her eyes. She's got really piercing eyes, like they just go right through the screen. So when things, I don't want to give away too much. When things later come in, happen in the screen, those eyes are still there, but there's a different kind of aspect to them. When it comes to casting, when it comes to like a thing like someone's eyes, in a lot of time acting is done with like through someone like looking at a screen and kind of holding the screen and all that. How much of an element does that come into casting a person like Elizabeth who has that kind of elements and is able to just really kind of strike into the audience through that veneer of a screen in between audience and character?
Mm. Yeah, well, I think, when I was casting the film, one of the things that instantly drew me to Elizabeth was her ability to connect through the screen. And I think that you're absolutely right that a lot of that is in her eyes. And you just want to watch her. Like, she's just so interesting to watch. And I think part of that is when she's acting, she's 100% in it, and she's very much, she is totally connecting with the audience in that moment. And there were so many opportunities to, the close up loves Elizabeth's face, and
Yep.
those eyes that she's got, I think just made her somehow really relatable. Just seemed to really connect with me in the casting process. And then obviously she's been able to do that and connect with audiences as well. So I think like there's a massive intelligence with Elizabeth that she brings to the role, and certainly you look at her eyes and see that intelligence there as well. And it says something about the cliche, the eyes are the gateway to the soul is absolutely
Right.
true. And I think the first point of connection you have with anyone is with those eyes, and she was able to do that in every one of those scenes. It was, yeah, always captivating to watch.
The Matt's Movie Reviews YouTube channel is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you will love. How do you film that? How do you film the baptism scene at the start? Because this is full immersion, body in water and back up again and back down and back up again through that kind of proxy baptism thing you're talking about, baptism of the dead. How do you go about filming something like that? Do you have, is it, how much of it is a lease? How much is a stunt person? How much is it is like a real kind of like um pool that your like baptism kind of a bath thing that you're working with? How much is it like in post? Like I'm just really curious how those kind of scenes come about and are filmed and shot.
Yeah, well, that scene in particular, we shot that over 2 days, and that opening scene and everything in that sequence was very important to me to spend a lot of time getting the opening scene of the film right. And, in relation to screen time and page count, it's not as hefty as some of the other more complicated sequences in the film. But because it's the first thing we see, it's really, really important that it's done at a level that there's no room for error, I guess. It's got to grab people. And I think we rewrote that scene, Mike and I, like literally 50, 60 times to try and we had so many different iterations of how it would happen and how it would work and how the pacing would work to try and get it right. And when we were shooting it, Elizabeth was just an absolute trooper. Like she was just dunked so many times because it's a one camera movie, so it's not like we have five cameras shooting everything. It's all one camera, so we've got to if we want a different angle, we've got to do it again. We did have we could take the side of the baptismal font off the bath that she's in. We could take the side off, and there was a Perspex wall there, so we could shoot
Hmm.
straight through that to get some of those underwater shots. So we didn't actually, at any point, submerge the camera in the water. It was always outside of the water. And we had lots of safety people around where the water was heated and as comfortable as we could make it. But there was a point where we had to use colder water in one of the bits as well, which was tough for Elizabeth and for Seraphine, who plays LaRue in the film, because it was cold. It was damn cold, and those guys, never one complaint. Always professional and did what we needed to do, and it was tough, and there were a lot of sort of physically difficult things for Elizabeth in particular. There's all kinds of stuff that happens during this movie, and yeah, she just stuck it out and did what we needed to do. And I think one of the things you talked about how good her performance is, and I just couldn't be happier with what she did in the film. I think one of the reasons why it's so good is because she was just willing to kind of go as far as she needed to go, and every one of those sequences to make it as believable as possible. And I'm sure she hated doing some of it because it was really physically difficult for her. But you can't tell that on screen because she just brings her A game every time. And that's really important because I think that if in these types of movies, you kind of have to be silly sometimes in the moment, you're doing something that might feel absolutely ridiculous. But then when we put it all together, it is what it is and it kind of works. And she was always willing to do that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the performance works so well.
I think another crucial element to this film is kind of like the makeup and practical effects side of things. I'm a big advocate of that kind of filmmaking. I'm a big advocate of kind of like as practical as can be. And I know sometimes it can be really difficult to kind of pull some of that stuff off, especially with independent film. But I think that it has more of a weight than like compared to more kind of like computer graphic kind of stuff that might happen in post. What's your approach to kind of like doing those type of effects? How much do you want to try to capture in camera on the set as opposed to trying to do stuff like and I know there's I'm for sure there's going to be stuff happening post as well, but like for example the whole scene with the blood and like I don't want to give away too much, but it's a really cool scene with the blood and something happening there. A lot of stuff with with again don't want to give away too much. A lot of cool stuff with makeup, transformations, things like that in the movie. I think are really well done, and I'm just curious about what your approach is in regards to that type of horror filmmaking.
Yeah. Well, like I believe that absolutely everything that can be practical should be practical at every single time. There's a number of reasons for that. I think it's very tempting to do everything CG because in many ways it's a lot cheaper to do that, and it sort of feels like it's not, but it is because the,
Mm.
the thing is that when you're on set and you're doing things practically, people forget that every time you do something, you blow something up and there's blood everywhere. You've got to clean everything. Actors got to go off and get completely cleaned up, new costume, come back in. And that burning of that time costs you far more than it would to just do it in VFX and kind of move on in many cases. I mean, it's a case by case thing, but most of the time that's sort of what I found. So there's a lot of pressure on low budget films like this to not do that. But I think that honestly, it looks better every
Yeah.
single time, and there's just something about it where people just know when there's visual effects involved, and like there's probably more visual effects in Diabolic than people realize. And the
Mm.
reason why that is because we've been able to augment physical, realistic things that were there on the day rather than starting with nothing and adding VFX. It's kind of like, okay, well, for instance, one of the characters has contact lenses in their eyes the whole time, and that we didn't have enough money to make them custom for that particular actor, which is what you do when you have the money to do that. So they're just sort of like generic, still high quality, but generic kind of contact lenses. And one of them sort of slipped so that the one eye's looking this way and one eye's looking that way, which on the day looked absolutely ridiculous. So we use visual effects to fix one of those eyes, and you'd never be able to tell which shots that's done in. Like no one would be able to tell that. So that's an example of where visual effects, kind of make the physical effects kind of a little bit better and work on the day. And certainly, like anything to do with any kind of when two characters are interacting, should always be practical wherever possible. And it's also a lot of fun to do it on the day as well. You kind of feel like a kid again, playing with fake arms and legs and heads and whatever it might be. And it's kind of what making movies is all about. It's amazing how many of those kind of solutions you had when you were a kid to make something work end up being the exact solutions you're using for this level. So yeah, I love it.
It's Yeah, it's amazing to me how many filmmakers I've talked to, especially in when they do horror movies or anything in that kind of genre space, how when they work with practical, how it's just such a cool thing to capture on screen. But not only that, like it's really cool the reactions from the crew and maybe other actors and such to watching these things happening on the set, how it all kind of plays out. I love to be able to watch that one day, maybe be on a set one day and see it come to life. Because I think for me that's kind of like the wizards of like cinema, like those makeup artists and those special effects guys that what they do. Um, the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video, one of the best on-demand streaming services available. Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. There's some really genuinely creepy moments in this film. But what I really dug about Diabolic is that a lot of times it seems like you are not going for the trope, you're kind of messing with the trope at times. Once in a while, there might be a jump scare, but sometimes when you think there might be a scare coming, because we're used to certain beats when watching horror movies. You mentioned before, like the James Wan films, like Conjuring, for example, we're kind of used to like, this is going to happen there, this is going to happen there, and it doesn't necessarily happen. It can linger for maybe a beat more. Maybe that kind of like what we're waiting for, that big kind of crash to happen won't come, and it just sustains a little more in regards to the creepiness and eeriness. Um, when it comes to something like that, like making a scare scene or a sequence, a scene full of dread, for example, how much of that is script? How much of that is post? How much of that is like editing? How much of that is, on the set, trying to get those beats in camera? I'm just really curious about your approach to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of all of those things. I think it's about making sure that on the page, certainly you have an idea and a sense of the pacing of where you are in that particular moment, and like in the film as a whole, and understanding, okay, well, is this going to be a short moment of tension? Is it going to be where there's going to be a scare? Is there going to be release? Or are we going to, hold that kind of tension going into the next scene? And just really making sure that there's enough room for that to breathe. And sometimes on the page, it's very, very simple. And you kind of, as a director, know that you can, oh, this bit's going to actually be this long when we film it. But I think the majority of it comes down to the shot listing and the staging, and making sure that you do really have enough time to really play things out, and give it that tension and that sort of breathing room that it needs. And there's a scene that we really love to do with Mia Chalice in the closet where she's by herself and she gets locked in there. And that's one of those ones where when the lights go out, it's just sound for 30 seconds or something. And that was something that we made sure we got right on the day to really pace that out. So there's no time added there in the edit. It's all done on the day. And really driven by Mia's movements to physically, she's really lighting those matches herself and doing all of that stuff and just going, okay, well, we actually need a bit more time now. That wasn't quite right. Let's have it, instead of when you light match two, let's do that 2 seconds later, or whatever. And sometimes I would cue them or whatever it might be. And then when you get into the edit, having an editor like Sean Layeff, who's, one of the best editors in the business, and certainly in horror is an absolute master. he's really great at really understanding what the intention of the scene is and being able to build that out. And then when you start adding in the layers of music and sound design, it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. So it's kind of like the intention of the scare or the intention of holding dread or whatever it is, just being very clear about what that is before you shoot it. And kind of in a way, or the way I work anyway, is very much trying to shoot the edit. I think in cuts all the time and really understanding where those cuts are going to be, so I don't overshoot as well. So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it's kind
Yep.
of yeah, it's really about every single stage making sure that everybody's making the same scene in the same moment, and you know where that fits in the tapestry of everything, so that because sometimes you could craft an amazing little sequence on its own, but if it hasn't been set up correctly earlier on, or the previous scene's too fast, so it's all kind of all linked together, I guess.
That scene you mentioned before about Mia being in that room or that closet is one of my favorites in the film. As there is another scene where kind of like there's a things happening in the background, maybe someone's walking past or doing something, and it's Miller, it's something really bad is going to happen. Just seeing that, and I think the anticipation of it is something that really kind of works with me more now than just say the jump scare aspect of it, because I don't know what it is. I think it's just seeing things in the background, shadow play, a character walk past, a character maybe in the corner, like maybe a blink and you might miss it kind of thing. It kind of messes with you psychologically, and I really kind of dig that kind of those kind of scares these days. I think they work really well, especially in Diabolic. Um, I know you've had a few different screenings. You did Monster Fest had its whole thing a few months ago, and people have seen the film. That's kind of like the time, right, when you have you've made your film, you made your baby, and it's out for the world to see and for people to see. When you go to screenings, maybe to say the first screening you went to where like a general audience get to watch it, do you find there are moments in the film that um, register with people more than others? Do you find that maybe there's a scene where maybe someone might freak out during a moment where you didn't think they might freak out? Because it's really interesting how sometimes people react to being scared or being in an environment where there is a very kind of ominous kind of setting in it. There is dread and there is all these things going on, and the reactions can come out of nowhere. I'm just kind of curious what your own experiences were with something like that.
Yeah, I think the majority of the moments that we kind of designed for the film sort of landed the way that we wanted. I think that there were probably some scares that I thought weren't as big as they ended up being, which was great. I think there's a certain satisfaction sitting there knowing what's coming when someone next to you doesn't, and hearing them scream or jump or whatever is kind of, and then laughing afterwards because they're having a good time. Like that's exactly what I want people to be feeling at that moment. But I think that the ones for me is when I sort of have a bit of a cheeky look and can see, like scenes that you'd mentioned where someone might walk past in the background and just seeing people smile, kind of having that experience of that's kind of what horror is all about, is having that sort of that fear response, but you're in a safe environment. So you're kind of like smiling, like waiting for something to happen. Those are the kind of things that I think make the genre really unique compared to everything else. And certainly the biggest enjoyment I got out of watching it with an audience is stuff like that.
Well, for everyone out there listening in Australia, November 20, you can get your own experience on with Diabolic. Scare yourself while watching the film. Highly recommended that people do check this out in the cinemas for the limited run. I'm going to have the link in the show notes to go to the Monster Fest website, where it's going to have all the locations of where you can watch Diabolic, because I really, really recommend people watch this film in cinemas because the sound effects, the filmmaking, the performances, the score. I forgot to mention the score as well, how great it is. The main motive of the film kind of harkens back to me, kind of like some of the stuff in the 70s, like kind of like the very kind of ethereal but also spooky kind of stuff that's going on there. It's absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I just want to say, Daniel, thank you so very much for your time. Congratulations for the film once again. And I really do hope that a lot of people get to see Diabolic, so that when next Halloween comes along, we get to see some witches out there. We got to see some Larura out there as well. I reckon that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'll be amazing. Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. Thanks for your time. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.